And honestly, Travis still felt weird about it. He had started seeking out specific figures to use as guidance for becoming more like the person he wished he could be. But for now, the number of those figures was stuck at exactly 1. And quite frankly, having only one figure to look up to was a lot more uncomfortable than having none at all. It felt like it could easily become an obsession if he wasn't careful, and the fact that this figure in question was a fictional character wasn't helping. Almost like he was starting his own personal religion around folklore he had manufactured in his own head. So far, he hadn't been deifying this character. Far from it, the DVD he purchased as an emotional reminder was still sitting in his drawer collecting dust. That certainly wouldn't have been a respectful shrine to his new god. But Travis had been trying, sitting down and literally doing nothing but concentrating on brainstorming other figures, real or fictional or living or dead or male or female or white or black or Canadian or whatever, looking for other figures who he could honestly consider a role model without looking like an enormous tool for doing so. And there were a lot of figures who came close, but none whom he felt quite comfortable elevating to the status that he had that one motherfucker in that one godforsaken movie. Take his favorite comedian, for example. Dude said a lot of brilliant and profound shit and had a lot of good critiques on the absurdity of modern American life, but he didn't really offer a lot of solutions to fix those absurdities. Plus, it was a fairly well-known fact that he actually wanted to be a Hollywood actor and only stuck with stand-up because it paid his outstanding bills to the IRS. Okay, what about the lead singer of his favorite band? A very intelligent man with a very sophisticated philosophy on life and the world, who kinda sorta knew he was a very intelligent man and was a wee bit too self-righteous for Travis's taste. And it wasn't too cool when he straight up called the ex-guitarist a crackhead when he quit the band for a while. Oh, and their last album sucked too, like that song that tried making fun of neo-Nazis from the perspective of neo-Nazis, but then real neo-Nazis found it and liked it unironically and started using it as their own. Yeah, Travis could respect the bravery it takes for an artist to publicly fail, but maybe he shouldn't be idolizing someone who failed that badly. Okay, screw it. How about a long list of heroic historical figures ranging from Abraham Lincoln to Harriet Tubman to Isaac Newton to Florence Nightingale to Nelson Mandela to Susan B. Anthony. This was a gigantic maybes pile. Hey, people might not think you're evil if you tell them your personal hero is Martin Luther King or Albert Einstein, but they might think you're weird. Actually, on second thought, they might think you're evil if they think you're being dishonest about who your heroes are to impress them. And then there was the sheer fact that even the greatest people in history had flaws to be found if you just scratch beyond the surface a little bit. And this was to be expected, they were only human too. But after finding himself jealous of a character who wasn't a real human being, and whose biggest flaw was only briefly questioning his own heroism in a scene that only explored it for not even 2 minutes before they moved on to something else. To reiterate, Travis was well aware that this character was not exactly the most well-rounded. After finding himself envious of someone like that who wasn't a real human being and wasn't susceptible to real human flaws, real humans didn't really do it for him anymore. There's a reason they tell you never to meet your heroes. Maybe he was supposed to pick somebody who nobody could have ever met, but only imagined meeting. So, fictional characters? What, Superman? Yeah, no, talk about overcorrecting. Instead of picking a real human with real human flaws, pick a superhero who's literally not a human because he's a fucking alien and whose only weakness is literal radiation poisoning. Yeah, that's a relatable figure, alright. And shit, did Superman even have a personality besides superhero? Travis wouldn't know. He couldn't watch superhero movies because he would just get jealous of the main characters. But at least the guy in the movie Travis watched had most of a personality. The only thing he was missing was relatable flaws. Okay, how about the guy from To Kill a Mockingbird? Atticus Finch, the lawyer dude. Almost, but a little too stuffy for Travis's taste, personality-wise. And he defended the innocent, that was all well and good, but he failed in the courtroom. I mean, yeah, a hero suffering a failure can make their resilience more compelling. But wait, what good was Atticus doing before the black guy got falsely accused? Was he twiddling his thumbs and waiting for an opportunity to do good? The character from the godforsaken movie Travis watched made Atticus look like a passive lazy ass by comparison. And then a quick Google search shows some people saying Atticus was no hero because he played along with the racist status quo in a racist line of work instead of challenging the status quo. So fine, Travis was going to cross this guy off the list too. Besides, the book itself was boring. Not bad. Just really fucking boring. How about Jesus? Not as a religious figure, but as a literary folk hero. Idolizing an old world folk hero from centuries ago. Would that be too cringy? Probably. Besides, people might mistake him for a Jesus freak. The actual Jesus freaks would hate him for not treating their Messiah as such. And depending on the writer, Jesus could be kind of a dick too. What with all the talk of, I'm here to turn people against each other until the people who love me above all things win the fight. Matthew 10:34-39. Speaking of Jesus Christ, how much time had he wasted on this brainstorming session? Was this going to be his entire day? Was this episode even going to have a freaking plot, or was this it? One thing's for sure, it really was time wasted because he could never for the life of him conjure a figure quite as fitting for a role model as that insufficiently flawed hero in that poorly written movie. And Travis knew that he could just mix and match, ignoring the negative traits from these figures while taking cues from their positive traits when he was in a situation that he thought one specific figure would be strong in. For example, fight for justice like Batman, but don't be a blatant tool of right-wing propaganda like he is. Never stop making discoveries and thirsting for knowledge like Marie Curie, but don't mess around with uranium as much as she did. And be steadfast in your morals like Mahatma Gandhi, but don't do creepy things with young girls and make friends with German dictators like he did. Travis knew there was no reason he couldn't do this, but he knew he wouldn't. Not because he didn't want to, but because he assumed, correctly, that if put on the spot, he wouldn't be able to roll the decks through his mental archive of all the admirable people and fictional characters in history and think about what they would do. He would have a knee-jerk reaction wherein he would either A, default to the skittish little shit he was raised to be, or B, default to that one specific character from the movie. And even then, there is no guarantee he would do a good job emulating him. And you know what? That's probably what sucked the most about there only being one single entity he could point to and say, that. I want to be like that. It didn't matter if that was this one guy or anybody else. When there's only one, it's all too easy to find yourself thinking, I need to be exactly like that, or I'm going to feel like I failed. Because again, with multiple inspirations, you can pick and choose traits, but with just one, you can find yourself seeing them as a blueprint you need to follow to a T. And for Travis, that had already happened. And no, you would not be the first person to tell Travis,
oh, you shouldn't want to be the next somebody else. You should want to be the first you.
No. Travis knew who he was. That person wasn't admirable. That person wasn't effective. That person wasn't happy. He could keep his name, but he needed to be somebody else on the inside. And as for ripping off someone else's personality, well, hell, you don't need to tweak a proven formula. After all, good artists copy, mature artists steal. Of course, while he had a proven formula for the traits he needed to have, he didn't have a surefire way of actually acquiring them. What could he do today? What could he do right now toward becoming more like the person he wanted to be? Brainstorming other role models was a fruitless endeavor. He could see himself wasting his entire life trying to think of day-by-day steps for becoming more like who he wanted to be and still never figuring it out. But he had wasted enough time, and he needed an answer now. For every minute of time wasted in this episode so far, he'd wasted 10 times as many panicking, trying to figure out what the fuck he needed to do to get anything done in his life. God damn, he really wished some adult in his childhood would have taught him how to teach himself things, which he couldn't teach himself now because... You know what? He was going to roleplay. He was going to live a day pretending he already was who he'd always wanted to be. Maybe putting himself in the right headspace would give him some inspiration. But where? Where could he get some worthwhile practice? He needed a challenge. He needed a situation he couldn't have prepared himself for. He needed snacks. Overcoming his anxiety and telling himself that he didn't care what the cashier thought, he was going to buy $20 worth of wildly unhealthy junk food from the gas station. Hey, a Pyrrhic victory is still a victory, isn't it? Well, Travis didn't know what that character would do in every situation he could ever find himself in. He did know some core things about that guy's personality, and one of them was that, while he wasn't completely deaf to others' opinions on him, he would be discerning in which ones he listened to. He'd care about how a loved one thought of him, not so much how a judgmental checkout clerk thought of him. That guy had enough core confidence to do what he needed to do to not let a little thing like other people's opinions on him cloud his thoughts. Was bullshitting self-confidence just going to backfire and make things worse? Maybe. so he welcomed a low-risk situation like this to figure it out. But first, snacks! Alright, how about some barbecue cheese crackers, some salt and vinegar tortilla chips, ooh, a chocolate bar with chunks of cherry in it, that could be interesting, and a different chocolate bar made with name brand cola, that could be more interesting, a bottle of pear-flavored soda, he'd been waiting his whole life for something like that, and... oh, there's that chicken wrap from the train with the asshole guy who was nice to everyone except for him. Like, it was exactly the same chicken wrap. He remembered the paper packaging rather than the standard plastic. He really didn't need to see that. But he made his way to the cashier anyway. Nobody else was there, so the cashier looked at him immediately, and they locked eyes. The cashier had a friendly enough smile, and Travis smiled back. And in that moment, Travis felt fine. Not amazing, a little shaken after seeing the chicken wrap, but the quantity of anxiety he had in his head telling him that something was going to go wrong was negligible. Shit, was this what it felt like to be that goddamn character? He was feeling fucking great. The cashier wasn't the regular older guy with a limited command of English. This was some younger guy Travis had never seen before. The guy seemed a little bit awkward and dorky, but you know what? That was fine. Nothing sinful. Travis could certainly sympathize. And if nothing else, he could feel better about himself by comparison. This poor guy reminded Travis of the person he used to be back before he found his self-esteem. 20 minutes ago. Hey there. Hey, how it going? Wait a minute, what the fuck? Why did that come out funny? You find everything alright, man? Yeah, man, everything's alight. Wait, alight as in on fire? That's not what he meant. Hey, good to hear. For what it was worth, this guy seemed to be tripping over his words too. Man, you got some good tasting snacks. Oh yeah, man, I know what's good for me. Okay, that was at least a coherent sentence, but it didn't sound very socially cognizant. These are pretty good. Have you tried these yet? Oh no, man, it's all new to me. Alright, this was confusing. Travis didn't feel nervous. I mean, he was starting to get nervous now because the words weren't coming out of his mouth right, but anxiety was the product of that, not the cause. Was it just a matter of not having enough practice talking to people? Was this brain damage from all the times the kids at school had punched him in the head? Or was anxiety so deeply rooted in his DNA that he couldn't even bullshit confidence while speaking extemporaneously, no matter how fine he felt? And for what it was worth, this guy didn't seem to be much more comfortable either. Not a complete wreck, but still pretty shaky. It was clear that he was trying to project artificial charisma too. Jeez, nothing was more awkward than two awkward people trying and failing to fight their nature and act sociable toward each other, and he was saying that as someone who was one of these two people. And he worried for a second that maybe the other guy was only acting uncomfortable because he was uncomfortable with Travis tripping over his words, but nah. If this guy was really so socially confident in himself, he wouldn't be getting nervous just because Travis was nervous. Holy shit! This guy could tell that Travis was only pretending to act confidently. And that wasn't just some unfounded paranoid conjecture. Travis knew that this guy knew he was faking it because Travis could tell that he was faking it too. And much like how Travis saw himself in this person, he likely recognized that Travis was just like him too. And if he could see it, everybody probably could. And that's when it dawned upon him. There was no enemy in this episode. This cashier guy, he wasn't impeding him in any way. There was no antagonist, there was only an obstacle. And that was Travis's own sheer incompetence at being a normal person, thereby preventing him from ever being a compelling protagonist. He wasn't good enough to be the hero in his own story. The enemy was his own deep-seated lack of self-worth. And everyone else in the world could see it, except for him. Hey man, do you want to give an extra round up to the next dollar for children's cancer? I mean, for fighting children with cancer. I mean, fighting for children with cancer, against children's cancer, not supporting it. You know what I mean? Yeah, sure, man. It's all good with me. It's all good with me. Travis said that because he thought that's what the person he wanted to be would say. And even if he couldn't present himself like such a person, he hoped he could at least emulate them where it mattered. Oh, and also the government had been paying him way too much money for his unemployment checks recently, so these small acts of giving back were literally the bare-ass minimum for what he could do for society. And as he stuck his card into the reader, he felt good that at least somebody was marginally benefiting from his failed attempt at narcissism, but that didn't counteract how bad he felt that he was right the first time. He needed to do a bunch of shit before he could actually feel good about himself in a way that others would find compelling. And in the meantime, he couldn't even convincingly pretend that he deserved to be regarded as an interesting person. Jesus, how could this get any more awkward? Do you think I'm awkward? Of course that was the one sentence Travis could speak eloquently on his first try. Of course it was. I mean, maybe, but hey, we all are sometimes, aren't we? I mean, it's only human, right? Well, that was a nice answer. And Travis sure hoped this guy was right because he was starting to worry there really were people out there who really didn't have these experiences, or at least were damn good at pretending they didn't. And he felt like he was going to be chasing those people. Forever. You know, they always say, you talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? They insinuate that it's easy to fake something, but hard to actually be that thing. Well, maybe Travis was the weird one, but he couldn't even pretend to be a great person until he believed himself that he actually was one. And this wasn't to say he was giving up on himself, he was just really running out of ideas. Okay, so he needed to actually act like the motherfucker he wanted to be before he could feel like he was genuine. That much was established. He'd already tried using his ideal version of himself for reference when in tough situations, but that hadn't worked. At least not yet. Did he just need to keep at it, or was it never going to work? It was like working out. Did you just need to push harder, or do you actually clinically have low testosterone and even lower metabolism? The only way to find out was to keep trying. And then there was a very real chance that you'd find out at the end that it was always an enormous waste of time and you were always fated by biology to fail. Or maybe he did just need to push harder. Maybe instead of waiting for opportunities to practice fall into his lap, maybe he should seek them out. Ooh, seeking challenges. That sounded like something the person he wanted to be would do. Certainly something that godforsaken character would do, but ooh, the thought of it made Travis nervous. He'd still force himself to do it, but shit, what challenges could he seek toward the end of becoming more like this? He really wasn't making excuses, he just legitimately couldn't think of anything. He could tell himself that he'd be on the lookout for an opportunity, but that was exactly what he'd been doing the first time. Well, apparently he needed to burn more time brainstorming, and before he could do that, he needed to put himself in a more positive mindset. So you know what? He looked at the receipt from the gas station. He wasn't going to be cynical. He was glad he rounded up to the next dollar to help those cancer kids. He just hoped his contribution was helpful.